My 28-year-old sister with zero real work experience just became CEO of the company I built with 14 years of 70-hour weeks, while I got to keep my operations manager title and watch everything I created get handed to the air. I started working for my dad's construction company when I was 22, straight out of college, thinking I was joining a meritocracy. I stayed because I believed in what we were building. 14 years later, that struggling local firm had become a multi-million-dollar operation, and I had been the one keeping every major project, every client, and every deadline from falling apart. Clara spent those same years getting her MBA, posting polished LinkedIn quotes about disrupting industries, and showing up just long enough for photos before leaving for networking events. I was the one actually running the business. She was the one being prepared to inherit it. The announcement didn't even happen in a room. It came by email in 2024, like a software update. Effective immediately, Clara will assume the role of Chief Executive Officer. Ethan will continue in operations to ensure a smooth transition. A smooth transition from the person who had been running everything to the person who had never run anything. That was the moment I finally understood what family legacy really meant in this house. It didn't mean who built the company. It meant who was born to inherit it. I was good enough to keep the machine running. I just wasn't good enough to be seen as the heir. They made the heir the CEO instead of the builder. Let me explain how I became the foundation of a company that was never meant to be mine. When I started at 22, Dad's construction business was bleeding cash. We had 3 employees, 2 active jobs, and a reputation for running weeks late and tens of thousands over budget. One supplier had already cut us off. A bank had flagged our line of credit. I thought I was getting an entry-level role. What I actually got was a company 6 months from folding. I spent my first 2 years learning everything: blueprints, subcontractor bids, city permits, material pricing. While my friends were still figuring out their 20s, I was working 70-hour weeks trying to keep payroll from bouncing. By year 3, I'd rebuilt our estimating system and landed our first real commercial contract, a $1.4 million office renovation that put us back on the map. By year 5, we'd moved into mixed-use developments. By year 10, we were winning municipal bids that required compliance audits and performance bonds, the kind of work small family firms usually never touch. I built the client relationships. I wrote the schedules. I negotiated the contracts. I designed the project tracking system that let us run 5 sites at once without chaos. Every major decision ran through me. Every crisis landed on my desk. Every success happened because I worked behind the scenes to make it real. But while I was building the business that would become our family legacy, Clara was building her resume for a position I didn't even know she was guaranteed. While I was learning the business from the ground up, she was encouraged to get a well-rounded education. While I was solving problems in real time, she was presenting polished MBA case studies over dinner. Dad never hid the difference. Clara sees the big picture, he'd say after she talked strategy. When I talked results, he just nodded. That was expected. She was the visionary. I was operations. She was being prepared to take the wheel. I was the engine that kept it moving. Every client dinner, every industry event, she was introduced as our future leader. I was introduced as the guy who keeps everything running. I was essential, just never the successor. She was being groomed for the family legacy. The board meeting where they made it official lasted exactly 12 minutes. I sat at the same conference table where I'd presented quarterly reports for 8 straight years, while Dad read from a printed agenda like he was announcing a zoning update. Mom nodded. Our 2 outside board members, Dad's lawyer and our CPA, avoided eye contact. This transition makes sense for where we're heading, Dad said. Clara brings fresh leadership and strategic thinking that will help us scale. What about my track record? I asked. I've been running day-to-day operations since before we even won our first commercial contract. Mom smiled like she was explaining something obvious. That's exactly why this works. You're incredible at operations. Clara has the vision. As if keeping 5 job sites, 3 lenders, and 27 subcontractors aligned for a decade somehow didn't count. We need you to help her transition, Dad added. Introduce her to the clients. Show her how everything runs. They wanted me to train my replacement. Dad called it fresh leadership. Clara's first week as CEO proved how empty that phrase was. On Monday, she scheduled a strategic alignment meeting with our biggest commercial client, the one who was already 60 days behind on a 6-figure invoice. On Wednesday, she approved a rush job without checking crew availability, forcing us to subcontract work we normally handled in-house at a loss. On Thursday, she signed off on a change order that would have violated city permit conditions if I hadn't caught it. When I raised it during our Friday check-in, she didn't even look up from her phone. "I thought you were handling the operational stuff," she said. "The operational stuff. The part where the company didn't implode. I'll focus on strategy and relationships," she continued. "You can manage the day-to-day. Strategic relationships with clients she'd never met on projects she didn't understand." She asked me to keep the company alive while she kept the title. The family dinner that Friday night made it painfully clear what my new role was supposed to be. "How did Clara's first week go?" Mom asked, passing around her famous pot roast like we were talking about a summer internship. "She's getting her feet under her," I said. Dad leaned forward, satisfied. "I knew this would work. Clara brings the business vision, you bring the operational expertise. Perfect partnership." Partnership, where one person got the title and the other got the workload. "She's so lucky to have you there guiding her," Mom added. "You know the clients better than anyone." "That's the beauty of family," Dad said. "We support each other. Clara gets the benefit of your experience. You get the benefit of working under fresh leadership." Working under. Clara mentioned reorganizing some of the project systems, Mom continued. "You'll help her with that transition, right? The same scheduling, cost tracking, and subcontractor system I'd spent 8 years building, the one that finally stopped us from bleeding money on every job." "Of course he will," Dad said before I could answer. "That's what family does. We help each other succeed." They expected me to teach the heir my job. What they were really asking, without ever saying it out loud, was for me to become Clara's shadow CEO while she collected the credit. Monday morning, Clara called me into her new corner office, the one that used to be Dad's. The nameplate with her title had already been installed. "I want to understand the foundation you built," she said, opening a spreadsheet. "Walk me through every active client, Westridge, Halcyon, the city contracts, all of it." That's weeks of work," I said. "Great, let's meet every morning at 7:30, she replied, typing notes. "I need to absorb how everything runs before I optimize it." Optimize. Then she added, "I also need you to handle all client communication for the next few months. You know their personalities better than I do." Client communication, the part of the CEO job that actually kept invoices getting paid. "And you'll keep running project schedules and crew assignments," she continued. "I'll focus on big picture leadership and strategic partnerships." Big picture leadership, while I handled every detail that kept projects from collapsing. By Tuesday afternoon, her assistant had forwarded me 3 emails from Clara asking me to prep her for client calls, full briefings on contract terms, pricing history, and ongoing disputes. By Wednesday, she'd asked me to draft talking points for a lunch she was having with a developer whose project I'd personally salvaged 2 years earlier. By Thursday, I was still running daily operations while also writing strategy memos for her to present as her own. Every time I tried to push back, the answer was the same. "You're just better at this stuff, Ethan," she said. "I don't want to mess anything up." That was the trap. If something went wrong, it would be on me. If something went right, it would be on her. By the end of the week, nothing had really changed, except the name on the door. Clara had been given the CEO title. I had been given both jobs. I was doing my job and hers for the same paycheck. 3 weeks into Clara's leadership, the cracks started showing. It began with Westridge Development, our largest commercial client, a $2 million mixed-use project that kept half our crews busy. Clara had been relationship building with their project manager, which in practice meant canceling 2 weekly check-ins and arriving unprepared to the third. "Your new CEO doesn't seem to understand our permitting timeline," their PM told me. "We have municipal approvals pending, and she keeps talking about synergy instead of addressing the delays." The delays Clara had created by approving design changes without clearing them with the city first. 2 days later, a formal email landed in my inbox from Westridge listing 3 compliance issues and requesting a corrective plan within 10 business days. Clara was in Seattle at a leadership conference when it came in. I spent 4 straight days calling city planners, expediting revisions, and begging inspectors to move our paperwork up the queue. When I finally reached Clara, she shrugged. "Client management is about expectations. If they don't like our strategic direction, maybe they're not the right fit." 2 weeks later, Westridge terminated the contract, citing communication breakdowns and project management failures. We lost our biggest client under her watch. 2 days after that, another email hit my inbox. Subject, Notice of Compliance Review, Westridge Site B. The city was freezing all inspections until the revised permit Clara had approved was formally resubmitted and reviewed, a process that could take 3 to 5 weeks. 3 to 5 weeks of a job site sitting idle. That meant crews we were still paying, equipment rentals we were still being billed for, and a client who now had every reason to argue breach of contract. When I forwarded the notice to Clara, she replied with one line, "Let's discuss this in our next strategy session." Strategy, while $500,000 in labor and materials sat behind a locked gate. Then the internal damage started. Miguel, our lead foreman, put in his notice. Sarah, our project coordinator, started sending out resumes. Even Grace, our receptionist, who had been there longer than Clara, asked if she could talk privately. "No one knows who's in charge anymore," she said. "Meetings get scheduled, but nothing gets decided. People are scared." Meanwhile, I was back to 70-hour weeks, not growing the company, just keeping it from collapsing. Subcontractors were calling about late payments. Clients were asking why their project managers weren't responding. City inspectors were showing up to sites where permits hadn't been properly filed. Clara's response was more strategic planning sessions. I stopped attending after the third one, where she told me to take the lead on implementation while she focused on vision alignment. The weekend after Westridge canceled, I was alone in the office at 11 p.m., fixing a bid Clara had submitted without checking our actual costs. She had underbid it by $40,000 on a job that was supposed to keep our crews busy for 3 months. Sitting there in the dark, staring at spreadsheets bleeding red, something finally clicked. I cared more about saving this company than the people who owned it. They were playing with the family legacy. I was bleeding for it. That night, alone in the office, I did something I'd never done before. I documented my actual value to this company. Not feelings, not loyalty, numbers. I pulled up our client retention files first. 14 active accounts, 12 of them had been secured during my tenure, and all 12 listed Ethan Mitchell as the primary contact. Not the CEO, not business development, me. Those weren't just names on a screen. Those were relationships I'd spent years building. Late night calls, job site walkthroughs, last-minute rescues when deadlines slipped. Clients didn't stay because of our brand, they stayed because they trusted me. Next, I opened our project completion records. Over the last 5 years, 91% of our jobs had been delivered on time and under budget. I clicked into the final inspection reports. Every single one carried my digital signature. I checked our safety metrics after that. 0 major incidents in 43 months. The insurance carrier had actually reduced our premiums twice because of our record, a record that existed because I had personally written and enforced every safety protocol we followed. Crew training schedules, equipment checklists, site access rules, all mine. Then I pulled employee retention. Before Clara took over, our annual turnover rate was 8%. The industry average was 22%. People stayed because they knew who they were reporting to. They knew problems would get solved. They knew the systems worked. I opened the revenue charts. When I started, the company was pulling in $1.2 million a year. 14 years later, it was doing $8.7 million. Not randomly, not through luck, but in clean, predictable growth curves that lined up perfectly with the operational systems I'd built. Every expansion into commercial work, every move into municipal projects, every increase in margins. All of it followed changes I'd implemented. Even Westridge, before they walked, had left a performance review calling our project management the gold standard for regional contractors. The city had recommended us for 3 additional municipal bids based on our exceptional attention to detail and professional communication. 14 years of 70-hour weeks quantified. Then I started documenting what had happened since Clara took over. Client complaints, 7 in 3 months. We'd had 4 total in the previous 2 years combined. Project delays. Every active job now behind schedule. Not because of weather, not because of labor shortages, because approvals were getting stuck in Clara's inbox while she was in strategy sessions. Cost overruns. The Halcyon project was already $18,000 over budget from change orders Clara had approved without understanding their impact. The city recreation center bid she'd submitted was priced so low we'd lose money if we won it. Employee departures. Miguel, our lead foreman, Sarah, our project coordinator, and Grace, our receptionist who had been here longer than Clara, quietly warned me that 2 more people were interviewing elsewhere. I checked our insurance claims. We'd had our first safety incident in more than 3 years after Clara approved a schedule that put electrical work and concrete pouring on the same day, something my protocols explicitly prohibited. Then I opened accounts receivable. We were carrying $68,000 in invoices more than 60 days past due. Not because clients refused to pay, because no one was following up. Clara had been too busy relationship building. 3 months, 3 major disasters. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen full of numbers that told a story my family refused to see. Then, Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Alexander Pierce. Pierce Industries was our biggest regional competitor, the firm that handled the large municipal projects we'd been building toward for years. Ethan, he said, I've been hearing some interesting things about changes at your company. I was wondering if you'd be open to lunch next week. I knew what that meant. In construction, news doesn't travel through press releases. It travels through inspectors, lenders, and subcontractors who suddenly stop getting paid on time. I think you might be interested in what we're building here, he continued. Someone with your track record would fit in very well. I looked back at the spreadsheets glowing on my screen, the ones proving exactly who had been keeping my family's company alive. For the first time in 14 years, I realized something dangerous. I wasn't as trapped as they thought. They offered me something my own company never had. The lunch with Alexander Pierce took place at a quiet downtown restaurant, the kind where deals happened in low voices, and no one asked unnecessary questions. I'll be direct, he said. I've been watching what you've built over there for years. Your safety record, client retention, and delivery metrics are rare. What's happening with your leadership transition is unfortunate, but it creates an opening. He slid a thin folder across the table. Operations Director, you'd oversee our commercial and municipal divisions, budgets, schedules, client relationships, all under your control. No one second-guessing every decision. It was everything I'd have been doing, without being treated like someone's employee in their own family story. There's also room to build something new, he added. We're exploring residential restoration. If the numbers work, someone with your background could run that division. Not promises, possibilities. Timeline is flexible, Alexander said, but discretion matters. If your current situation turns volatile, it complicates things. I understood the warning. If my family panicked, they could poison the transition before it even started. I drove back to the office with the folder on my passenger seat, thinking about what 60 days really meant. 60 days of still being responsible for everything, while knowing I was already preparing to leave. 60 days of Clara making decisions I'd still have to clean up. 60 days of my parents assuming nothing had changed. That night I wrote my resignation letter. No speeches, no accusations, just a professional notice with a 60-day timeline and an offer to ensure a smooth transition. I printed 2 copies, sealed one, and slipped the other into my briefcase. The next morning, I started documenting everything. Every client contact, every vendor agreement, every system that kept projects, payroll, and permits from collapsing. If Clara was going to inherit what I'd built, she was going to get it on paper, not by keeping me trapped as her safety net. But the risks were stacking up. If I told my parents too early, they'd try to guilt me into staying. If Clara found out, she could cut me out of client access or lock me out of systems. If the board got nervous, they could try to frame me as the problem instead of the solution. And for 60 days, I'd still be inside the company while quietly preparing to leave it. There was no safe version of this, only controlled damage. Sitting in my office, surrounded by 14 years of work that had just been handed to someone else, I finally accepted the truth. I wasn't walking away from the family legacy. I was stepping out of it. And once I did, everything was going to change. Sunday dinner at my parents' house was supposed to be a celebration of Clara's first quarter as CEO. Mom had made her famous pot roast. Dad opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving. Clara arrived with a tablet full of charts labeled Q1 growth indicators. I knew exactly what those charts were hiding. "How's everything going at the office?" Mom asked, beaming at Clara. "Really well," Clara said. "We're repositioning the company for long-term strategic growth." Dad nodded proudly. "I told you she'd bring fresh leadership." I waited until the plates were cleared. Then I slid a sealed envelope onto the table. "I have something to share." Dad froze. "What is that?" "No, my resignation. 60 days notice." The room went silent. "What?" Mom whispered. "Staya." I'm leaving the company. Clara stared at me. You're joking. I'm not. Dad opened the envelope with shaking hands. You can't do this, he said. The company needs you. 3 months ago, I replied, you said the company needed fresh leadership. Yay, that's different. No, it isn't. Mom leaned forward. Ethan, this is your family. You don't just walk away. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. Then let's talk about what I'm walking away from. I slid the first page across the table. Westridge Development, $2 million contract, terminated. Clara's face drained of color. That's not... I slid the next page. City compliance notice. Site frozen 3 to 5 weeks because permits weren't filed. Then another. Accounts receivable, $68,000 past due. Then another. Halcyon, $18,000 over budget. And another. First safety incident in 3 years caused by a schedule change that violated our own protocols. No one spoke. I didn't bring opinions, I said. I brought records. Dad picked up the Westridge notice and read it twice. That can't be right. It is, I said. Mom whispered, all this while we were celebrating growth charts? Clara shook. I didn't know. You never told me. I did, I said quietly. You just didn't listen. Dad stood. We'll fix this. We'll get a loan. We'll bring in consultants. You already chose, I said. You chose Clara. Clara started crying. I can't do this without you. You're the CEO, I replied. That's your job now. The room went silent. Dad finally asked, what happens now? I'll document everything for 60 days, I said. After that, the company is yours. I stood up. That's not my problem anymore. They finally understood who had really been running the company. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before I even made it out of my driveway. Grace was first. Ethan, the board just scheduled an emergency call. Clara's assistant is freaking out. By the time I reached the office, half the parking lot was full. Clara was pacing. Dad was pale. Westridge just CC'd everyone, Clara said, shoving her phone at me. Subject, immediate termination and compliance escalation, Westridge site. B. The email listed the missed permits, frozen inspections, and unpaid invoices. Everything I'd put on the dinner table was now in front of the bank and the board. The board call went live. Material breach, the lawyer said. With a city freeze, no draws can be made, the banker added. Clara tried to speak. They talked over her. We are suspending credit pending review. When the line went dead, the room was silent. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was the outside world seeing the truth. 6 months after I left, Grace called me. Halcyon got terminated, she said. Clara tried to renegotiate after breaking ground. The bank froze everything. I wasn't surprised. So, how's Clara? I asked. She's hired 3 consultants. None stayed. I looked out the window of my new office at Pierce Industries. My name was on the door. We've got openings, I said. 2 weeks later, Grace joined our municipal team. A month after that, Miguel followed. Not out of loyalty, out of trust. My parents still call sometimes, asking if there's a way to fix things. One night, my dad finally said it. You always kept everything running. We just didn't see it. I told you what I needed, I said. You chose not to listen. When I hung up, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. This time, I'm not working behind the scenes. I'm building something with my name on it.